Hi, I'm John from Just Whiskey. If you enjoyed today's show, please click like and subscribe and click the bell to be notified. And also, if you'd like to become a Patreon, there's a link to support me in the description below. Today, we're going to talk about, does smell and taste really matter? And of course, the answer is yes and no. And today, maybe I'm going to ruffle some feathers. My intention is not to be subversive, and I'm going to be upfront, and I'm going to acknowledge that I have the utmost respect for any and all whiskey tubers out there and the products that we all represent. Having said that, you're never going to hear me describe a whiskey or a sensation of enjoying a whiskey as picking an unripe pear in a field of heather. That's a visual scene that sounds very romantic. I recently read a description on a carton of a whiskey and described the finish as being a salty sea breeze of a finish. And again, that's a visual description. And yes, casks that are stored in dunnage warehouses on Isla or anywhere near the ocean or shore, yes, it's going to inherently pick up some saltiness and brininess in the casks. And maybe some of that is transferred to the spirit itself. As far as heather goes, I have some heather plants in my yard for ornamental landscaping. And for the life of me, I can't smell it. I've never been in a field of heather, so maybe if you're in a field of heather, maybe there are some aromas that permeate from that. Jim McEwen was on a documentary that I just saw about Brook and he was retiring from Brook, and in this room were several of his constituents bidding him a farewell. And Jim McEwen is a very charismatic character, and he raised his glass of probably some Brook, maybe uh, classic laddie, I'm not sure, but he raised it up, and everyone fell silent, and they were tuned into what he was saying. And he raised the glass, and he said something like this. I'm just summarizing here. He said something to the effect of, and Brook goes back to the days of when Prince Charles stood at the head of a glen and looked up into the sky and saw an eagle flying, and it brought a tear to his eye, and his tears fell into the river that leads to the Brook distillery. And to this day, we can still taste his tears in every glass of Brook. And everybody's eyes were open and they were just absorbed everything he said. And then he says, "Is that the biggest load of bullshit you ever heard in your life?" And that broke the ice and everyone laughed, including me. But that's kind of what I'm talking about. A lot of these, I shouldn't say a lot, some whiskeys with their labeling on the bottles and or packaging really take an exaggerated, in my opinion, poetic license with their descriptions. And I want to repeat that I have the utmost respect for any and all whiskey tubers and whiskey reviewers out there, any sommeliers, anybody that's gone to school or spent years honing their palate and their sense of smell and taste. And if that's what they enjoy doing, All the power to him. What I want to talk about today is from my point of view and my opinion. And whether it's written on a bottle or the packaging or listen to somebody's description, I find some common threads. And I'm just going to give you a couple examples of that. One common thread I hear frequently is they'll describe a spirit as being spicy, and then they'll say cinnamon, it has cinnamon and nutmeg, or clove and ginger, and sometimes they combine them all, especially cinnamon and nutmeg. I hear that a lot, and you start to believe that maybe cinnamon and nutmeg are in the same family and that they taste and smell the same, but they're completely different. Cinnamon is derived from the inner bark of the cinnamon tree. I'm not sure if I pronounced that right. It's the Latin word for it. And nutmeg is derived from a seed of a fruit that resembles an apricot, but it's a seed that grows on a evergreen tree. And if you ever smelt and tasted nutmeg, it tastes and smells like turpentine. It's like pine tar. Very distinct, completely different than cinnamon. And clove, clove reminds me of the clove gum, chewing gum, or the clove candies. And that's from a dried flower. And then ginger, of course, is from the root of the ginger plant, which is a very distinct, completely separate. But I hear it referred to in the same group, it's cinnamon and nutmeg. But they're all individual smell and taste. And then also what I hear often combined are, in one sentence, they'll say they're picking up dates, figs, and raisins. But again, those are three different, raisins are dried grapes, figs come from the fig tree, and dates are a separate thing also. And a dried date, when I smell a dried date, the husk kind of masks everything. So you're really not smelling anything until once you bite into it, then it's very sweet and almost brown sugar, maple syrup kind of a thing. Figs, they have a distinct smell, whether you're smelling it from on the outside or then when you bite into it. And figs are like candy. And they do the outside of the fig does smell like what a raisin tastes like once you bite into it. But even raisins, it doesn't have a lot of smell until you bite into it. But I often hear descriptions of dates, figs, raisins, dried fruits. They're picking up these smells and tastes, or cinnamon and nutmeg combined as a spice, But they're all separate, unrelated things. Not to change the subject, but today I'm not drinking any whiskey, but I'm enjoying this tea, and it's from the Bigelow Company, and it's called Constant Comment. And I really enjoy this tea if you're looking for something a little bit different. And they describe it as a first and most famous blend flavored with a secret recipe of orange rind and sweet spice. You can definitely pick up on the orange rind. They don't mention what spice it is, but I pick up on clove. So if you like orange rind and clove, add a little bit of honey to this. You only steep it 1 to 2 minutes. It's very strong. Really, really enjoy that. Back to smell and tastes. In my journey, I've never met any whiskey tubers personally. I've watched hundreds of hours from hundreds of whiskey tubers over the last few years. And again, I'm astonished at the myriad of smells, tastes, and flavors that some people can pick up on. Some people, including the labels on some of these things, products, have several smells and tastes, some even a dozen or more. I've never met anybody personally that has ever described a spirit as being anything more than smooth, or they either enjoy it or they don't. If I give somebody a bourbon and then I give them super heavily peated scotch, right away with the super heavily peated scotch, they're gonna, if the palate's not acclimated to it, right away they describe, it smells like medicine, and they don't like it, and that's on my journey. I base my experience on whether I enjoy it or not. And at the end of the night, I like relaxing. And sure, I can pick up on most of the basic notes. Like an oak, you're going to get the vanilla and the toasted caramel. And in sherry, you're going to pick up on a little bit of the raisin and the grape, and maybe a little bit of cocoa. But beyond that, and then of course if something's peated, that's a whole different thing. I can pick up on the Band-Aids and the burnt rubber and those type of things. But my point is, all these myriad of flavors, smells, and tastes, they're really a reflection, a mirrored reflection of the actual thing. Because in these spirits, there's no lemons added, there's no burnt rubber added, there's no white pepper added, there's no cinnamon or clove or nutmeg or ginger or dates or figs. None of these are in there. And then some people can pick up, baked apples and baked bananas and stewed fruits and stewed this. And more power to anybody that can pick out those type of things. But I can pick out some general characteristics, and I can tell if something's either two-dimensional or complex, or underwhelming or overwhelming, or something that might need some water and something that doesn't. But at the end of the day, for my enjoyment, it doesn't matter how many smells and flavors that are perceived, or that are no disrespect, but sometimes I feel that some of these things are imagined, even on the packaging, and some of these descriptions that I hear, I just can't relate to. Again, no disrespect to anybody that can relate to them. More power to you. I also enjoy IPA beers. And every year there seems to be new strains of hops that are being created, and different strains. And different hops, I do know, one might give you a bit of a melon flavor, one might be grapefruit, one might be hemp, one might be peach or mango. And at the end of the day, it's when I crack open one of my favorite IPAs, I can appreciate all the craft that went into it. And I can certainly pick out a couple of sensations, grapefruit, or is it hemp, or is it peach. But at the end of the day, I really don't care really what's in it. It's, do I enjoy it? And by the way, if you are buying an IPA, check the dates on the cans or bottles. You really want to enjoy an IPA within 3 months after it was canned or bottled. Most IPAs, once it gets beyond the 3 months, it'll never spoil, but those delicate nuances and flavors and tastes will dissipate and will even turn into give you like a grassy note, which can be off-putting. And if you're spending the good money for a good product, you want it to be fresh. What else did I want to talk about? That's really about it. Does smell and taste matter? Yes, of course it does. That's why we enjoy the whiskey in our spirits. We, I love spending minutes sometimes smelling and then taking a small sip and tasting it, and that's my enjoyment. But I don't feel compelled to try to decipher the perceived or real sensations that are in there. So I'm going to get off my soapbox now, and again, no disrespect to anybody out there. I don't mean to insult anybody's education or palate at all. I just telling you what my opinion is and what my experience is. So if you like today's show, please hit like and subscribe and click the bell to be notified. And I would really appreciate it if you consider being a Patreon, which there'll be a link in the description below. So hats off to you all, and take care.